Okay, so before we can go any further, of course, we need to install TypeScript. And as far as installations go, in all the courses I teach, this is really not that bad. It's pretty straightforward. There are far worse things to install. So if we go to the TypeScript docs, typescriptlang.org, although I've never typed that in my life, I just type TypeScript into Google. If we go to download, it will explain the various ways of getting it, and the easiest and by far most common way is to use npm. So in order to do that, of course, we're going to need to have Node and really npm installed. So hopefully you have some experience working with npm. It's pretty straightforward. We're not doing anything fancy. We're just going to run an npm command to install TypeScript. However, you should just check to make sure you have npm installed with npm-v. And if you don't have it installed, well, we can install it. If you go to nodejs.org, I'll also have a link in the description. Just click on whatever platform download you need. So I'm on a Mac, and then I'll just get the recommended for most users version. We'll just click that. I already have it installed, but you open up the installer, and it's very simple. It's like one click. You don't have to do anything except follow the instructions and say OK. So when that finishes, open a new terminal window, type npm-v, and you should see some number. You don't want to see command not found. So now that we have npm, or if you already had npm, it's time to install TypeScript. Now the instructions here will mention npm install TypeScript, which is valid, and we will do that later on when we cover Webpack, but this is going to install TypeScript on a per project basis. So in some individual project you're working on, if you want TypeScript there, that's great, and that is definitely useful at times, but what we're going to use in this course is actually a global installation of TypeScript. We'll have access to a command called tsc for TypeScript that we can use anywhere across the terminal, across our machine. We won't have to install it every time we want to use it in a given project. So we're going to run npm install -g for global TypeScript. It's really the only difference, that -g flag. So I've already done this. I think I can do it again, but it's just going to tell me you already have that. What are you doing? npm install -g TypeScript. And there we go. And we can check our work by doing a tsc-v. And we should see some version of TypeScript here. 4.7, 4. Whatever it is in the future. Hello, future people. As long as you get some answer, you're good to go. You don't want command not found. And if you are getting command not found, try restarting your terminal or making a new window, and usually that will fix it. All right, so that wasn't too bad. Next, of course, we're going to talk about using TypeScript. But first, I'm going to show you another tool that you might find useful in this course, just to quickly run code without having to do a lot of setup. Next up, I want to talk about the TypeScript Playground, which is a browser-based environment where you can get started writing TypeScript immediately without installing anything. So I'm showing it to you for two reasons. One, maybe some of you had trouble installing things. Maybe you're on a machine where you don't have permission to install software. You can go through the majority of this course using the TypeScript Playground, which I guess I should show while I'm talking. If we go to the docs, go to Playground, we see the TypeScript Playground. So that's the first reason. For some of you, you just might need it because you can't install TypeScript locally on your machine. The second reason, though, is that it's a great place to just try things out. If you're reading something on the docs and you don't want to get a project set up on your machine and create new files, you can just start typing TypeScript over here on the left. That's the TypeScript side. And then you can immediately see the compiled JavaScript. So you can, shrink this and have it go away, or you can look at it side by side, which also can be helpful. So we don't really see anything very TypeScripty over here, anything that's fancy syntax. We're not going to cover any of that right now, but what's cool is you can go to examples, and if you're trying to understand more about enums, which can be a little confusing, we'll talk about those later. Look at this crazy difference, what we see on the left side in TypeScript. Here's some more TypeScript, and then the corresponding compiled JavaScript. You can see it side by side. So this is a great just educational tool, a playground to learn more about TypeScript. So there's great examples here. I guess I should also mention a couple of other things. You can go into this tsconfig, which we're not going to touch right now. But if you happen to be using this to follow the course, if your installation locally didn't work, this is where you will change settings for TypeScript. And we have a whole section in the middle of the course. I tried to bury it because it's not the most exciting, but a whole section devoted to configuring TypeScript and all these options. So I'll cover that when we get there, but just so you know, if you are using the playground, and you're trying to change settings, that's where it is. It's hidden under, well, it's not hidden, but it's under tsconfig. And then one last thing I'll mention, if you want to actually execute your code, and let's just delete everything in here, and we'll put a console.log, hello everyone. This is just showing me the compiled JavaScript, but my code is not running. We can click run, and then we'll see the actual console.log being printed out here. And that's really all that I need to say. I guess you can export things if you want to share this with other people. You can send a link with your code. Like if you have a question about why something isn't working, you can put your code in here, share it with me in the Q&A, and we can take a look. You can also download it in VS Code. There's a lot that you can do. So that is the TypeScript Playground. I really recommend using it just to learn. Whether you have the local installation or not, it's just a great tool. The last thing you'll need, well, you technically don't need it, but the last thing I'll be using in this course is VS Code. Visual Studio Code will be my text editor. And I recommend that you install it because I'm going to be using the built-in terminal from VS Code. I'm going to be using the shortcuts from VS Code. But honestly, if you have an editor you prefer, you can absolutely use that. And there won't be any major differences. There's something you're really missing out on. But a lot of people like to have the exact same setup as me. So go to code.visualstudio.com. There'll be a link along with this video, and download whatever version it suggests to you. And when that finishes, open it up. This is what it looks like for me. I do have a theme that I've changed, which is, what are you? Material theme. So you can download that if you really, really want it. It's an extension, so you can search for that extension, material, and I have the material theme right there. No, this one, sorry, material theme. And then you can get the icons if you want. I don't think I'm using those icons actually in this course. I usually have them on, but again, this is totally optional. I use material theme, pale night, high contrast. I think it just looks best on video. Okay, so what's cool about using VS Code and most modern editors is that I don't actually need to go and install anything TypeScript specific. I don't need to include like a TypeScript package or go find an extension for TypeScript, although there are packages like tslint you can install. There's tslint snippets. There's TypeScript related extensions, but you don't need anything to get started. So now that we survived the probably the easiest installation of any of my courses, now we can move on to actually running TypeScript and writing some TypeScript. All right, so we have everything installed. Let's talk about using or running TypeScript and the basic workflow that you'll follow. So the first thing we need to do is create some file where we can write TypeScript inside of. Although if you're using the playground, you actually don't need to do that. But if we're running anything locally, I'm going to need to make a new file, and it needs to end in the .ts extension. So anything.ts. Let's go with basics.ts. Sure, it doesn't matter. We're not going to be using this file for anything past this video, so you'll probably want to delete it anyway. But that .ts tells our editor, tells VS Code this is TypeScript. See the little TypeScript logo there. There is one minor note around extensions. There's a second extension you'll see, and we'll cover this when we get to React and TypeScript. Of course, it only matters if you know React, but .tsx is TypeScript plus JSX files, where we can write JSX syntax with TypeScript. If you don't know what any of that is, don't worry. Almost exclusively throughout the course, we'll be using .ts. Okay, so unlike a lot of technologies where we write some code and then we have to go execute that code in order for it to do anything, with TypeScript, we get functionality, we get TypeScript hovering over us and watching everything we do immediately just in our editor. So I can start typing something like, let's use a math method, and of course we've got all of TypeScript to learn, so there's not much that we can do right now, but let's do something like math.round. So we use this method, right? This is plain old JavaScript that takes some number and returns a rounded version. But if we look, immediately I'm getting red squigglies. I'm getting this, it's almost like Microsoft Word, right? I'm getting spell check, but for code. And this is TypeScript. TypeScript immediately is telling me, you've got a problem. We expected one argument, but we got 0. So it says an argument for x was not provided, and x has to be a number, which is what this is telling me here. We will learn all about this syntax, but as you can see, I'm getting a warning immediately. I don't have to run TypeScript. I don't have to do anything from the terminal, and it's giving me some tips. It's basically giving me an error message. I'll put a number in there, and it's happy. I put something in there like hello or hegello, and it is not happy. It says you cannot give me a string. It's not assignable to parameter of type number. That's coming from TypeScript. JavaScript doesn't do that, right? If you type JavaScript in VS Code, you don't get any of this stuff. So that's just a very simple example, but so much of what we do in TypeScript is not actually executing a file or compiling it, but it's just writing code and getting those errors immediately. And then there is the second piece, which is actually compiling our code. And I'll show an example of that. Let's say that I have a couple of console.logs in here. Hello, and console.log, goodbye. And then, sure, I'll do a math.round of this number, and we will console.log that number. Okay, so we have some code, some really impressive code that right now is in a TypeScript file. And I want to be able to compile this to JavaScript. Right? That's the whole point of using TypeScript, or that is the end goal. We write our TypeScript code and then we compile it to JavaScript that we can then execute. So I'm going to open up my terminal. I can do this in a separate terminal where I navigate to the right place and I find the directory where this file is. Or if you prefer, and what I'm going to do in this course just to keep it nice and easy and all in one window, is open the VS Code integrated terminal. And no, I don't want to update right now. People are watching this, can't be updating. So I'm looking at this file, right? It's right there, basics.ts. And I can compile this file using the magical tsc command that we installed a couple videos ago. And then I can specify the file. Now don't worry, we're going to cover compilation in depth. This is just a quick rundown of how it works, but I'm just going to hit enter and you'll see in a moment I now have a second file called basics.js. The thing is, this TypeScript file had nothing TypeScripty about it. In terms of the syntax, it's just plain old JavaScript, so the compiled JavaScript file looks exactly the same. But it is valid JavaScript, and if I had some TypeScripty stuff in here that is not valid, for example, I could do something like pi, and then this weird colon number thing we're about to cover, and then set that equal to 3.14159. This is not JavaScript. If I put this in a JavaScript file, I do get an error, and it's actually telling me you're trying to use TypeScript in JavaScript. So it's a very detailed error there. But now if I have this code and then I run the tsc command again, my TypeScript is once again compiled down to JavaScript, and you'll see that that weird syntax is removed. We get the JavaScript that results from this TypeScript. So those are the two steps of using TypeScript. One is just writing your code, getting error messages, sort of dealing with things as they come up in the editor. And then two is actually compiling your code, which sometimes can take a long time for a really large, complicated project. The things we're going to focus on, it's pretty much instantaneous. So TypeScript acts both as a spell check for our code, for our JavaScript, basically, but also it does the compilation, and we use the tsc command to accomplish that. But again, we're going to cover compilation in depth, and we have just scratched the surface. So I'm going to stop here because I can't spoil the rest of the course.